Sneezing.
Hello, my name is John Rose Jr. I have the pleasure today of interviewing Curtissa Cofield, a judge of the Hartford Superior Court, of the Superior Court. Today is July 14, 2004. I'm conducting this interview as part of the Connecticut Bar Foundation's James W. Cooper Fellows Oral History of Connecticut Women in the Legal Profession project. The project is sponsored by the Connecticut Bar Foundation. Judge Cofield, would you tell us, please, where you were born?
Actually, I was born in the small town of Somerville, New Jersey, but I only lived there for a very short period of time. My parents were students, and they got back to North Carolina shortly after I was born.
And so you lived in North Carolina at some point after
North
New
Carolina is the state I call my home.
Jersey? And where in North Carolina was that?
A small town named Enfield, North Carolina is where the Cofields are from, and I grew up in North Carolina until I was probably 12 years old.
Okay, and what did your parents do?
My father is a Baptist minister. My mother is a retired school teacher who's now an AIDS activist and who runs a program called the AIDS Interfaith Ministry.
And where do they do that now?
My father is the minister in charge of the Emmanuel Baptist Church in New Haven, which is the church that was once ministered by Adam Clayton Powell. And my mother is, her program is directly across the street.
When did you move to New Haven?
My father's a minister and traveled quite a bit, and so I followed him. I think I was in college when he moved to New Haven, and then I left college and followed them to New Haven, and that would have been somewhere around 1970.
Okay, do you have siblings?
I have two sisters and a brother. One sister is a housing advocate. That sister's deceased. My other sister is a vocational counselor, and my brother is also a minister and a school counselor.
And where do you fall in the order of children?
I'm the senior sister.
Okay. Is it fair to say that there are no other people in your family who've gone into the law?
A distant cousin, but no one I'm intimately familiar with, no.
Okay, and what provoked your interest in the law in the first place?
I guess I'm a civil rights baby, civil rights era baby. I grew up in the 60s in the segregated South, and I experienced an injustice in the 60s that made me feel that the situation that I grew up in was not right, segregation was not right, and had to be changed. Specifically, one day I was about 12 years old traveling with my father in the small town of Roanoke Rapids, North Carolina, and we knew that we were living in a segregated South and that we were not allowed to eat in restaurants. But my father thought that perhaps we could eat in the drive-in type restaurant where you simply stop and put an order in through a loudspeaker. And we sat there for a very long period of time. And in my eyes, my father was a very important man. Being a Black Baptist minister is a very important position in the South. And I recall waiting for my father to place his order when a young man came out and looked at him and said to him, "We don't serve niggers here." And at 12 years old, I remember sitting in the back of the car directly behind my father and seeing my father bow his head. That was an experience that I had never had. And when I saw that, I said, something is wrong with the laws in this great country when a man with a degree from Columbia University and money in his pocket can't buy his child a hot dog. But Martin Luther King was also a role model for me, and he gave me the method because he said an eye for an eye leaves everybody blind. So I knew that I would have to work within the system to make this great country live up to its promises of equal justice for all. And I wanted a country that would respect my father. And I knew that law was the area that I'd have to go into.
A little bit more on the background. The high school that you went to, was it in North Carolina?
No, at that point my father had transferred to Lexington, Virginia, which is the home of Stonewall Jackson. And I was the first African-American female to attend the Lexington High School. So I've been a pioneer for quite some time.
In the course of your high school years, did you work part-time?
I didn't work. My work was going to church, I think, because that's basically what my life consisted of. I was a Sunday school teacher early on and worked actively in our church youth group, but I volunteered at the Stonewall Jackson Hospital as a candy striper.
You've already suggested some of the role models in your life, Dr. King and your father. Are there
Yes.
any others?
My mother and Thurgood Marshall.
And why Thurgood Marshall?
Thurgood Marshall was an inspiration because he fought for the rights of others. And I remember reading a story about his life where he too had experienced humiliation similar to what I saw happen to my father. He delivered hats and he was not able to use a restroom along his route because of segregation. So he tells of a situation where in delivering hats one day, he had overextended himself and needed to go to the restroom, couldn't find a place that he could actually use a restroom, so he got to the front door of his mother's house and he wet his pants. And that humiliating situation, according to Thurgood Marshall, inspired him to want to do something so that people, black people, could find a place to go to the bathroom
It's an absolute minimum.
would have equal justice under the law.
Where did you go to college?
I went to Shaw University in Raleigh, North Carolina, where my aunt was the dean of women and was assigned to watch me by my parents. And it was also my parents' alma mater.
And what year did you graduate Shaw?
In 1971.
How'd you pick that place to go to college?
Well, because of my roots in North Carolina, my family was living in and around Raleigh, North Carolina. I had attended North Carolina Central University for 2 years as well. But basically, it was a love for Carolina and family.
What was your major?
My major was psychology and philosophy. My lifelong quest has been to answer the question, is man basically good or evil? And that probably comes somewhat from being a minister's daughter and hearing my dad tell me that folks are basically good, but seeing sort of the opposite sometimes in the way people behave.
Did you encounter influential people in college who have caused you to think about your career or to change your lifestyle?
I can't say that there was anyone specifically because I was already driven when I went to college, but I suppose having an aunt who was the dean of women helped a lot. She kept me focused.
Was Shaw a coeducational institution?
Yes.
And did you engage in any extracurricular activities there beyond study?
Not so much at Shaw, but at North Carolina College, I was the captain of the cheerleading squad.
Okay. And subsequent to college, you attended law school.
Well, I made a stop at Yale Divinity School along the way.
Did you get a degree from Yale?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Master's of Arts in Religion.
Okay. And what year was that?
Let's see. That's a good question. 73.
All right. And was it thereafter that you determined to go to law school?
Yes. Once again, I was ready for the ministry, but the ministry wasn't ready for me.
What does that mean?
It means that at that time, the Baptist Church did not ordain women ministers. And that was not a fight I was willing to take on at that time. I thought that I might be able to do my ministry in another forum, such as a courtroom.
And what law school did you attend?
The University of Connecticut.
All right. And when you attended the University of Connecticut Law School, what was the population of black women?
I think that there were approximately 5 black women in my class, and as I recall, my class was probably the biggest class of minority students ever to attend University of Connecticut. A lot of students had gone to a program known as CLEO the summer before that recruited black people who were interested in going to law school. So I think we had a large CLEO class, although I didn't attend that program specifically.
What did your family think about you going to law school, having just finished the divinity degree?
They were excited for me. It was a first for our family. My grandfather was so happy. At that time, he was experiencing some health problems, but he vowed that he would live to see me graduate.
And did he?
He didn't make it physically, but he was there in spirit.
Amen. What year did you graduate law school?
1978.
Were you Was there anyone who inspired you in connection with going to law school, who gave you advice about what you could expect to find there, or what law school generally would be like?
No, I was terribly lacking in that area.
And law school for UConn in those days was on Asylum Avenue in West Hartford.
In West Hartford, yes.
Okay. And how many people in your class would you say, just generally? How many students?
I'm at a total loss.
Okay.
I don't recall. I would say 130 people,
And then what percentage of those were women?
perhaps about 30%.
All right. Did you perceive a reaction from the male counterparts who outnumbered the women, and for that matter outnumbered the minority women?
No, I think people were much too sophisticated to show any real bias at that time. But a book that I think has described my life along the way as a pioneer in different areas is The Invisible Man. And I think that it was much more subtle, and that we were the invisible women.
Ralph Ellison wrote one heck of a book that still impacts sociology and peopledom today.
Yes.
What activities did you participate in law school?
Basically, BALSA, the Black American Law Students Association, and Moot Court.
And was BALSA pretty much established by the time you got to law school?
It was thanks to community leaders such as yourself, John Rose Jr., and Attorney Joe Moniz.
Thank you. Did you have any women professors at law school?
I believe I had just one, and that was Professor Wendy Susko, who's now my peer on the bench.
Right. And what did she teach?
I think it was administrative law, but don't hold me to that.
It's fair to say that in the classroom at law school, the women would have been outnumbered by the men. What was the reaction, if you perceived it, of the professors to female law students and even to black women law students?
It would have been nice if there had been a welcoming committee when we walked in the door, but I think that basically we were treated with disinterest. It was swim or sink on your own, basically.
Did you have any mentors in law school?
The mentors came from the black lawyers who were out practicing in the community, who took the time out of their busy schedule to come in and let us know that there was a light at the end of the tunnel. And again, those attorneys were John Rose Jr., Professor John Britton, who was not a professor at that time at the law school, Attorney Sandy Cloud, and Attorney Joe Moniz.
What was the most important thing you learned in law school? A question that I've frequently been asked, and my response has almost always been the direction to the library. But what was your most important lesson?
Probably how to think critically about an issue, how to look at an issue from all sides, how to even argue the position I didn't agree with.
Did you work part-time while you were in law school, either in a law firm or in some law-related activity?
Not during the actual school year, but in the summer I worked at Legal Aid in New Haven, and I also worked in the public defender's office during law school.
I worked for a couple of years in the legal assistance program in New Haven, which was different from legal aid. We actually had neighborhood offices. You were in the legal aid program that Frank Deneen ran?
Yes.
One of the truly fine human beings in the Connecticut bar forever. Bar admission, when did you take the bar exam?
1978.
And what was your experience with that?
It was absolutely frightening, absolutely frightening, but survivable, because a group of students studied every day at we chose the UConn Medical School because it was isolated, it was out in Farmington, nobody bothered us, and we were there from 7 o'clock in the morning till midnight, put in about 16 hours a day.
Where was the bar exam given when you took it?
In New Haven and at a hotel.
Okay. My experience was it was at Yale in the summertime in unair-conditioned rooms. It was terror for 2 days, physically and otherwise.
Terror is a good description.
When and where were you sworn into the bar?
1979 in Hartford in the Washington Street Courthouse.
And before you went to law school, did you know women attorneys?
Not really.
Okay.
When I was in Yale Divinity School, I volunteered in an organization I'm recalling now called the Center for Advocacy, Research, and Planning.
Right.
And the person who directed that organization is now a Supreme Court Justice, Fleming Norcott.
Right.
And his assistant was Judge Clarence Jones, and they were an inspiration to me in going on to law school.
Both wonderful people. I'm happy to say that I actually recruited Clarence Jones out of Howard Law School way back when I was in legal services.
That's
And
amazing.
he's still a very good friend, as is Nick. You remember how many women were sworn in with you at the same time as you were sworn into the bar?
I don't recall. I think there were about 5 black women, but women totally, I don't recall.
My experience today is that most law school classes are at least 50% women, so we've come a long way. I'm not sure how far we've come in terms of minority lawyers, but do you have any notion of the population of women who are, for instance, partners in major law firms today who are black?
I understand there are very few. That's really not my area of expertise. I've never really been in the corporate sector, but in the courtroom itself, especially in the criminal courtroom, there are very few women lawyers, especially in private practice.
My recollection is the number today is certainly no more than 2 black women who are members of major law firms as partners, and that's pretty sad considering that fact. Do you know who the first black woman to graduate UConn Law School was and become admitted to the bar?
My information is it was Bessie Bennett, who was also a mentor and a very distinguished and kind jurist.
I believe that Bessie graduated UConn Law School about 1974.
I believe that's correct.
And having graduated law school myself in 1966, I know that Mississippi had its first black woman graduate member of the bar in 1965. So it's an interesting statistic, if nothing else. What work did you enter into when you graduated law school?
When I was in law school in my senior year, I had the good fortune to be in a trial practice class that was taught by a very distinguished Connecticut lawyer whose name is Hubert Santos. And there was a connection between us. And Attorney Santos soon thereafter became the corporation counsel for the city of Hartford, and he hired me as an assistant corporation counsel.
A job that I have some relation to myself at the moment.
Yes.
Did you aspire to be something other than, while you were going through the 3 years of law school, to aspire to be something other than an assistant corporation counsel, or was there a job you were pointing at?
I didn't know what area I wanted to go in. I just knew that my goal was to do something to bring about equal justice for all people, and I saw myself becoming a civil rights activist. I just didn't know what form I'd do that in.
What did you perceive the job market to be like for a black woman graduating law school when you did?
It was extremely competitive. When firms came to campus to recruit, very few black law students were approached or given the impression that they were seriously being recruited.
Did you interview with any private firms during the course of the time that you were at UConn?
I interviewed with a couple.
And was that something that the minority law students generally shied away from or were caused to shy away from?
Well, I think that people will apply for a job if they think they actually have a chance of getting that job, but when it's clear that it's just an exercise in futility, that people don't want to waste their time, and that was the way the black students perceived the corporations who came to campus.
When you did graduate, you went to work for the city as an assistant corporation counsel. How long did you work for Hartford in that capacity?
Well, that was a stepping stone onto a greater opportunity, but I worked in that capacity for 1 year, and it was a wonderful experience because not only did I get to work in city government, but I got to meet many politicians who worked throughout the city and the state and who were able to help me advance in my career.
You say it was a stepping stone to something else. What happened after that position?
Well, my assignment in the Corporation Counsel's Office was as legal advisor to the Chief of Police. So I worked in the Hartford Police Department, and I got a taste of what police officers actually do. I was a legal advisor to police officers. I rode with them in their cruisers to try to tell them, how to actually follow the law in making arrests. It was a hair-raising experience for a young Black Baptist minister's daughter, and I learned to increase my vocabulary with a lot of words I wasn't allowed to speak at home. But from there, I decided that this is an exciting place to be, criminal law, criminal justice, and I spoke to some prosecutors and explored the opportunity of applying for the job of prosecutor, although there was not, at that time, and never had been, a black female prosecutor in the state of Connecticut.
And do you remember how you got that position?
I learned a little bit about politics from people in City Hall, and I knew that I would need, so to speak, a godfather, a mentor, someone who would help me get a foot in the door. And I did my research and found out that there was a very distinguished black judge from the state of Connecticut sitting on the bench in Hartford whose name was William Graham. And he didn't know me, but he gave me an opportunity to be heard. I sent him my resume. I told him I was interested. I asked for an interview with him, and he was kind. He accommodated me and became my biggest cheerleader.
An aside, I'm not sure that I've ever told you this straight up. I got a telephone call at my home one evening from Judge Graham. I'm sitting there just fat, dumb, and happy, wondering what's going on in life, maybe watching television, and this judge calls in the middle of the night and says, I've got these 2 resumes in front of me, a man and a woman, and he gave me your name and the gentleman's name, and I said, pick the woman, and you became the first black woman prosecutor in the system.
That's right.
And that was approximately what year?
That was, I hope I'm getting my years right here. That was 79, specifically. I do remember that. That was 1979. I started the day after Martin Luther King's birthday.
And where did you go to work?
In what was known as the Morgan Street Courthouse.
That would have been the circuit court, right?
Yes.
And the court of original jurisdiction in Connecticut.
Yes.
And you were a prosecutor.
Yes.
What kind of work was that?
Well, actually, I represented the state of Connecticut in matters in which people were charged with crimes. I think the most interesting thing about the Morgan Street Courthouse was that it was at one point an old school, and it was a very dilapidated, rundown building. It had no air conditioning. It was very hot. There was no female bathroom for a female prosecutor. So I was assigned to the same bathroom as the criminal defendants. And there was only one way in and one way out. And many days I felt that just going to the bathroom was a life-threatening experience. So it was an eye-opening experience. It was a difficult experience. And I wish there'd been someone there to help me as a mentor once I was in there, but it's pretty much on my own.
How long did you do that work?
Many years, approximately 11 years.
Do you have a particular case or incidents that stick out in your memory from being a prosecutor?
I can't think of anything specific because I took all of my cases seriously and I thought that they were all equally important. I would say that it was a wonderful transition for me to start at the last office in the old courthouse at Morgan Street and move up to the head office in the courtroom at 101 Lafayette Street when I became the supervisory assistant state's attorney.
And when did that happen? How long did it take
It
for that
took
to
me,
happen?
it took me, I think, 10 years to do that. And along the way, I applied many times for a promotion to the Part A prosecutor's office and got very close, I'm told, but no cigar, never actually got that job.
Is it fair to say that prior to you having made such an application, there had never been a black person who had been a Part A prosecutor?
That's correct. And there wasn't until recently, I'd say within the last 4 years.
Okay. Do you remember what you were paid when you started as a prosecutor?
I remember what I was paid when I was started in the Corporation Counsel's office. Exactly, it was $17,000.
I'm happy to tell you that when I started in legal services, it was $7,500.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
And my first state prosecutorial job, I moved all the way up to $9,000 a year.
Wow.
Would you say that what you were earning as a prosecutor was similar to what your male classmates who graduated from UConn Law School was making?
I
Were making?
can't say, but my impression was that I was on the low end of the pay scale.
How long were you a prosecutor in total?
About 11 years.
And having had that experience, would you have changed life and gone into the private sector if you had to do it over again?
No, the job was challenging. I was a pioneer. Being a pioneer means that sometimes you stick out and you don't have anyone to circle the wagons with you, to cover you. But it was difficult, and there were days when I thought maybe this isn't the best place for me. But it was a great experience to be actually practicing law in a courtroom every day.
Were there other women practicing as prosecutor when you were there?
No, no. There was one woman in the public defender's office.
And who was the chief prosecutor in the circuit court at Morgan Street when you arrived there?
Irving Aronson.
What was your daily routine like when you were a prosecutor at the GA court?
Well, we had about 300 cases a day, and we'd get in probably about 8:30, go into the courtroom, sight unseen, looking at files. People would line up around the courtroom and out the door and down the stairs, and we had a few minutes to evaluate a case, look at the person, check their record, try to figure out what a just disposition would be, and talk to that individual and try to resolve the case.
Did you try a lot of cases in that posture?
I would say yes. I had quite a bit of trial experience.
And were most of those jury cases?
Yes, most always.
And what do you think of the jury trial experience as a black woman?
Well, that's a tough question. I can't say that I ever feel that a verdict turned one way or the other because I was the prosecutor and I was a black woman. But it was sometimes harder for me in terms of jury selection to decide who might be good for the particular case.
You worked closely with police officers during that time.
Yes.
Again, is that fair?
Yes.
Most of them, many of them were your most important witnesses.
Well, yes, that's true. Police officers were tough characters to work with at times, but once they understood that we were on the same side, working for the same goals, law and order, they'd cooperate.
In your experience, just generally, are there advantages or disadvantages to being a woman in practice at the time that you were working first as a prosecutor and now as a judge?
I think there were more disadvantages than advantages. It was just a tough situation because everything that I had to do had to create a way of being effective, a way that was different than the way male prosecutors interacted with police officers, for example, or with defendants. I can remember sitting in the Morgan Street Courthouse at the table where we interviewed clients next to a male prosecutor and having many defendants go around me and say they want to speak to the prosecutor, just assuming that I was the secretary. And sometimes in situations like that, they got what they asked for. You know, they'd stood in line all day, and then now they wanted to talk to me, but to the prosecutor, so they lost their turn and had to wait for another prosecutor.
When did
You
you
had to have a sense of humor.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure that's true. When did you become a judge?
In 1991, I became the first African-American female judge in the state of Connecticut. I applied for the judgeship in approximately '89, and I think I languished on the list for about 2 years before I was appointed. And that was kind of my experience all along. It wasn't that people were necessarily trying to hold you back, but it also, I didn't find that people were actually trying to help you achieve your goals either.
And what governor appointed you?
Governor O'Neill had the opportunity, but Governor Weicker took the stand.
It's interesting to me because Governor Weicker put me on the Judicial Selection Commission. I became the first black person ever to serve as a lawyer on the
What year
Judicial
was
Selection
that?
Commission. Right around 91, 92.
That's
And I'm happy to
amazing.
say that a lot of the appointments to the bench by our most recent governor were of blacks and Hispanics and women who I saw come through and helped in some instances come through the Judicial Selection Commission.
When I came on in 1991, I was the first African-American female judge, but there was also, there had never been a Latino judge, and Governor Weicker also appointed Carmen Espinosa,
Right.
who became the first Puerto Rican female judge, and Eddie Rodriguez, who's the first Puerto Rican male judge.
In the system as a judge now, what manner of work do you do? Where do you sit? What kind of cases do you handle?
A little bit of everything. We're not really specialists once we're appointed to the bench. Right now, I'm sitting in the New London GA, but it's a consolidated system, so I am a trial judge. I've been a trial judge for the last 5 years, and mostly I'm on trial continuously. I do Part A trials and Part B trials. I also handle housing right now. I do housing trials. I handle family for about 3 months in this term. So I've done a little bit of everything.
For the benefit of the viewers, what does Part A versus Part B mean?
Well, everything starts in the Part B court. Even arraignments of even capital penalty cases start at Part B. It is the court of first impression, and anything over a usually C felony is transferred then to the Part A court.
When you become a judge, is there some manner of program for training you, giving you exposure before you're thrust onto the scene, given a robe and said, go dismiss or dispense justice?
Well, fortunately, there's a 3-week judges school sponsored by the judicial branch. And that gives you an opportunity to sit with other judges, to actually sit with them on the bench and get an experience for what it really feels like to sit on that side of the courtroom.
In your position as a judge, as long as you've been at that business, you have occasion now to see many lawyers come before you. I'd like to kind of take you back to when you first went before a judge in the circuit court system as a young black female prosecutor. What do you remember about the reaction of the court, of the judges to you?
I suppose it depended on the individual judge. I would say for the most part, it was a trial by fire. There were occasional judges who were very supportive and very encouraging, but for the most part, it was not a friendly situation.
How do you, this is now an opportunity for you to tell us how you perceive of yourself as dispensing not necessarily justice to individual defendants, but how you deal with lawyers who come before you.
Well, I think maybe it's just part of the way I was raised, but I often say to people when I go out and speak in the community is, if everyone would follow just one rule, we wouldn't even need courts or judges, and that is, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's very important to me, and I try to treat the lawyers the way I'd like to be treated. I don't see that because it's an adversarial system, we have to be nasty or disagreeable. I think that there's still a room for courtesy and cordiality, and I try to be respectful.
In your judge experience, have you had a mentor or mentors?
I didn't have mentors who were actually judges. I keep singing the praises of people in the community, but you get your role models wherever you find them, or your role models are who, I guess, volunteers to help you. And there's some people that I could never forget, and those people are Bose Barlow, who was an attorney, Art Johnson, who's now deceased, who was in charge of the City of Hartford Social Services, and William Brown, who was the director of the Urban League. And I can remember when I went for my appointment to be interviewed as a judge, William Brown, who was probably then about 75 years old, decided that he wanted to accompany me. And he went with me. And I almost couldn't get him to leave when I went into to the chambers to be interviewed. And he actually sort of looked around the room and said, "Are you sure you're going to be all right in here?" And I said, "Believe me, I'm going to be fine." And I think he left the impression, treat her very kindly, treat her with respect. And there were people like these three individuals who helped me.
Is there a case or cases that you've sat on that stands out as you sit here today?
Any case involving children affects me profoundly. I have a great love for children. I'm an adoptive parent. I adopted through DCF. My husband and I just recently went through foster care licensing. And I just try to keep an open door for a child in need. So I'm very affected by cases where children have been abused and are handicapped before they even get a start in life.
What does your husband do?
He's a Superior Court judge, and he's also the son of a Black Baptist minister, so we had a lot. We have quite a lot in common.
Indeed. I guess my next question might be, who has the last word in your household?
Well, that's an interesting question. Who does have the last word? He'd probably say I do, and that's probably true.
And when did you marry?
I've been married for 3 years.
Okay. I could ask you, I suppose, what your husband's attitude toward your career is, but since it's the same as his career, let me ask you this. Did you become a judge before he became a judge?
Yes.
All right.
It's really interesting. I was a prosecutor, a lifelong prosecutor, and he was a lifelong public defender.
That's wonderful. So you came at this from different ends of the world, as it
Yes.
were. And you indicated that you do have children. You have adopted children.
I have 2 children. They're now 16 and 18, and my husband has an 18-year-old daughter.
Do your children have any aspirations to the law as they've expressed it to this point?
Well, my son says that he'd like to go to law school. My daughter says that she'd like to become a social worker and help other children become adopted. But I think that what they've learned at the dinner table more than anything else is what their rights are.
How would you say having children has affected your career?
It made it very challenging. For a large part of my career as an adopted parent, I was a single parent, and the juggling was just unbelievable.
Describe what a typical day might be like, God forbid.
I would have to get up in the morning, and it seems that my children and their sneakers were never in the same room at the same time. So we'd every morning have to go through, have you seen my sneakers routine? And I remember when they were very young, I would get up and put on my uniform, my navy blue suit, and burp a baby right before I left home. So I'd always have baby burp on usually a left or right shoulder. And bibs just didn't seem to help. And it was just always a matter of trying to be very organized, but trying to plan, in addition to my workday, my children's lives. So it was very demanding.
So for a significant period of time, you were a single parent
Yes,
with 2 children.
yes.
That must really
And
have
it
been
was really,
challenging.
it was really tough. I can remember creating a way of warming calamine lotion in the microwave when they had chicken pox, and having to go out to the community for public speaking, because I do quite a bit of that, and think it's important to get out and be seen in the community and educate the community. But I can remember so many times waiting for the babysitter to come and running out the door with a cotton swab with calamine lotion and handing over a baby, and trying to keep my physical appearance something that the community would be proud of as well.
What does your family think of your legal career to this point?
They're quite proud of me. I know my children are proud of me. I was raised in a family that never left children at home. Children were always taken to all of the adults' professional meetings and community functions, and so my children have pretty much been on this ride with me.
Are you a member of any bar associations?
The Connecticut Bar Association, I was a member of the Connecticut Bar Association, the Hartford County Bar Association, and the National Bar Association.
Okay. And in Connecticut, there is an affiliate of the National Bar Association, being the Black Bar Association created.
George Crawford Law Society, yes.
Have you been a member of the George Crawford Law
Yes.
Society in the past?
Yes.
And George Crawford is actually named after a Yale graduate who I think at one point I thought was the first black graduate of the Yale Law School. Turns out he wasn't at all, although he stayed in New Haven and practiced for many, many years. And that's why I think it's certainly appropriate to name to have named the association after him. The Crawford Association's done a good deal for a great many years for black lawyers in this state. Are you active in the Connecticut Bar Association?
Not now, no.
And does being a judge impact that?
I think it does. I mean, unless there are other judges who have a lot more energy than I do. I think that one thing that might be sort of a downside about being a judge is that there's a lot of isolation. And perhaps a bar association or a professional organization is the only organization that you can really be active in once you're a judge. But my focus is on community activities and community education, public speaking.
I've often wondered about the isolation aspect of judges, because I've spoken with several black judges, in fact, a couple of whom have actually left being judges because it was such an isolated job. And how have you adjusted to that?
It's been tough, but I many times look in the mirror and say to myself, it's lonely at the top. It's awfully lonely, and I suppose having a husband who's a judge is somewhat helpful. But I have a very limited circle of friends, and our ethics code is very tough, and our activities are very limited. So I try to explain this to friends, and I do what I can in organizations such as the Ebony Horsewomen, of which I'm a member, but I can't get involved in any type of fundraising, so that leaves me out of a lot of the functions that the small community organizations might have, because so many of their functions are fundraisers.
What organizations do you belong to in the community now?
I'm on the board of the Connecticut Prison Association. I really like that because that allows me to come up with some creative solutions to the problems that we see in our society and in the criminal justice system. I'm a member of the board of directors of the Ebony Horsewomen. I'm active in my church, the First Cathedral. There are quite a few organizations. I just can't think of them all right now.
Okay. Historical events, if you had to reflect on what's happened in the course of the time that you've been alive, the wars that this nation's been involved with, the civil rights movement, the women's movement, what kind of impact, if any, would you say those had on your career, on your thinking, and which ones exactly?
Probably most profoundly the civil rights movement and Dr. King. I was a student in North Carolina when Dr. King was assassinated. At that time, I was living in a segregated society and legalized apartheid in this country. I participated in student nonviolent movements, picketing, and I recall that the one town that I'd go shopping in most often, Smithfield, North Carolina, had a large sign that said, "Welcome to Smithfield, North Carolina, home of the Ku Klux Klan. Help fight integration, communism, and Jews. Impeach Earl Warren." And being greeted by that kind of propaganda so frequently really inspired me to become a part of the civil rights movement and to fight for equal justice for everyone.
And given that we've recently celebrated the 50th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education, what do you think about the progress that we've made in terms of integration of the races?
That's a tough question, John, because obviously things have changed a lot, but a lot of things remain the same, and there's still room for change. I had the wonderful opportunity of going to the Norman Rockwell Museum within the last month and seeing Ruby Bridges speak. And Ruby Bridges is the woman who Norman Rockwell painted a poster of as she was integrating a school in New Orleans at 6 years old. And I didn't know until now that even though Ruby Bridges fought her way through a line of hateful people every day to get into the school that she was attending, the school that she was integrating, she was not actually integrated into the classroom with the other students. She went through all of that every day to get into that school building and then have her own classroom and her own teacher. And she talked about how she missed mostly at 6 years old not being able to play with the other children, although she loved dearly her teacher who happened to be from Boston. So at 6 years old and from Mississippi, New Orleans, she spoke with a Boston accent. So we've come a long way from that type of segregation. But when I look around at the status of schools, Ruby Bridges, in fact, said that the very school that she integrated and tried to help bring about change in is now as segregated as it was when she first integrated it.
That's a true testimonial. Your own experience was that you integrated a school in the South.
Yes.
As a young woman. What was that experience like for you? That is to say, were you isolated and put into a separate classroom or not?
Socialization, no, I wasn't put in a separate classroom, but socialization is so important in life, and you learn from socializing with other people. When I used to go to the Lilburn Downing High School in Lexington, Virginia, and at that time, busing was not an issue. The only people who were bused there were the black students, and black students were bused from all the counties around Lexington, Virginia, and they went to the Lilburn Downing High School where I also went, and it was a segregated situation. And my parents talked to me about the importance of creating change and bringing about change and asked me if I would like to go to Lexington High School. So the next year, I just showed up and started to attend the high school. I was a member of the band, the Latin club, the literary club, the chorus. I joined everything I could think of. But I recall that when I was in the chorus, this is my first and only act of real militancy. I was in the chorus, and we were preparing for the annual concert. And the song that we were going to sing was Old Black Joe. And I'm in this chorus, and I know I've got to perform. And we get to the lines that say, "I hear the gentle voices calling, Old Black Joe, I'm coming, and my head is bending low. I hear the gentle voices calling, Old Black Joe." So I said, you know what? I'm in the chorus. but I'm not going to say my head is bending low. So, if anybody was watching my lips that day, they know that I didn't say my head was bending low. So I figured out how to be a part of the system, but not be humiliated by the system. And I had to find creative ways to keep my ego intact along the way.
Has being a lawyer lived up to the expectations that you thought it would bring to your life?
Yes, it's been a wonderful, wonderful ride. Being a lawyer has given me an opportunity to get my foot in so many doors, to have so many opportunities and experiences, to meet so many people who are lifelong friends. It's everything I thought that it would be.
If you had to do it over again, would you become a lawyer again?
If I had it to do over again, I suppose I'd prefer to be Oprah, but
Yes, wouldn't we all?
But as a working person, yes, a lawyer.
And if in fact the ministry had been open to a black woman when you took your degree at Yale, do you think you might have gone that route?
I would have gone that route, and I still say that I may someday go that route. And I don't see that the two are mutually exclusive. I probably would have become a minister, but I think I would have ended up in a courtroom in any event.
What advice would you give to a woman entering the legal profession today?
Find a buddy. When you go into law school, just find some friends. Work hard, study hard, and just remember what your goal is and why you're there. And stay close to friends and family. Keep your support systems intact.
How do you view the role of lawyers in society today?
Lawyers are social engineers, basically. Hopefully, they see something that's wrong and try to create change. I don't think the public in general sees lawyers that way, but I think that lawyers do a good service and keep people from perhaps counting 10 paces and turning around to shoot. So lawyers provide a very decent and good service.
Do you think that that role has changed in the time since you first came to the bar?
I think it's become a lot more adversarial, and it appears that people don't trust each other as much. A lot of rules have changed. There are no, for example, in-chambers conferences anymore because it's just not acceptable, and it's not recommended, and that's sad. I wish people could trust each other a little bit more.
Having been at the bar since 1966, I can tell you that that's one of the things that I miss. I don't do a lot of criminal work, haven't done a lot of criminal work in years, but I really liked the access to the judges that I had back when, which you don't have anymore, and I think that's an unfortunate experience.
I don't think the public respects lawyers as much as they used to, and don't look up to lawyers as much anymore as role models in the community either.
What do you think women have brought to the profession?
A different perspective, and I hope I'm not being stereotypical, but I think perhaps the courage to be compassionate. I think it takes courage sometimes to be compassionate, to have people look at you and say, you're being soft on crime, when in fact, you're not being soft on crime, but you are actually trying to figure out a non-combative way to resolve a problem. And I think that that's an important effort.
How about what technology has brought to the profession?
Sometimes I feel like a dinosaur. Well, I know that now you can e-file in the civil courts. It's much easier to find cases, to do research. It helps us be better prepared.
I had an experience myself in the federal court not terribly long ago with a judge and a clerk and a court reporter, all of whom had video screens in front of them. And I worried during the course of the jury trial, not having a video screen in front of me, that the judge was not taking significant amount of time to examine the witness as opposed to examining the screen in front of him to determine what in fact the question was. I always thought that it was appropriate the more for judges to be observant of how a witness was reacting to a question in addition to what he or she said in response to the question.
I think it's probably
bothered me.
a matter of style and depends on the type of case that you're doing.
Is the practice of law different today from when you began, would you say?
Well, I think that the answer to that question is the same as the previous question. It's just that the lawyers especially are more adversarial and people are not as courteous.
And what can you do about that?
I've heard that there's an organization that I'm not totally familiar with, but I need to research more, called the Knights of the Court, where people joined just to talk about this very issue and to figure out ways to encourage cordiality and respect for the court.
Certainly is something that you'd like to get back to, where people are being civil with one another as well as adversarial. But
another thing I just thought about that I'd like to say as it relates to how the practice has changed. Court TV has done its damage to the profession. And what I find is that the citizen on the street now, the average juror who comes into the courtroom, I often say to them, this is not court TV. I am not an entertainer. There's not going to be an open and shut case in the next half an hour, because people's expectations now are totally different, I think, than what they used to be. People expect that when they come into the courtroom, it's going to be lights, camera, action, and Judge Judy.
we're going to take a break at this point, and we'll be back.
I think I turned around when you...
Welcome back. I'm here with Judge Curtissa Cofield in connection with the Connecticut Bar Foundation's Oral History of Connecticut Women in the Legal Profession. Judge, is it your experience as a judge in the Connecticut system that you have the opportunity to interact with judges in other states?
Not so much for the most part, but there's an opportunity, for example, to belong to the National Women's Judges Association or to go to different training institutes. I've been to several and meet other judges.
And what's that experience like, yours as opposed to the experience of women judges in other states?
A lot of it's the same as it relates to some of the bias that we meet in the community or even in court, but you get to brainstorm and talk about different solutions, and it reduces your tension also, because you get to sort of exchange war stories and keep a sense of humor.
How many women judges are there in Connecticut? Do you have any idea?
Not totally. I think there are about 155 judges total. There may be a few more with some recent appointees, but I think maybe 30.
Are women?
Yes.
Okay, and the way that the judge situation works, as I understand it, you got appointed by a governor and you move up on a seniority scale. Is that what happens?
There is no real seniority scale. The way it works now is that you go to a judicial selection commission, you get yourself on a list to be recommended for appointment, and then should the governor choose to select you from that list, you are then appointed, and then you go through confirmation.
Tell us about your experience with the Judicial Selection Commission. What was that like?
It was probably one of the most frightening experiences I've ever had in my life, next to my first day in law school or taking the bar exam. It was held in a hotel in a big conference room, and there was a round table. And since this is history, I'm not going to be a revisionist. I'll tell you exactly how it really happened. I walked into that room, and the table was full, and I spotted one African-American male who I later learned is Mr. Mitchell from Waterbury, and there was one Hispanic or Latina she's now a judge, member, whose name is Carmen Lopez. And it made me feel good to see them there, I can tell you that.
Mr. Mitchell was not a lawyer.
No,
He was
an
citizen
insurance
appointee.
agent, I believe, but he was a citizen. And at that time, the big issue among appointees was, I think, marijuana. So the first question you're asked when you sit down at that table, and it's I guess it's your first opportunity to be judged, to see what actually being judged is like, is what your position is on smoking marijuana. And so you get through that first question, which is really putting you on the hot seat. And from there on, people really did try to make me feel comfortable. But it was a frightening, frightening experience.
There are now a reasonably decent number of judges of color, either Hispanics or blacks. Is there an association of judges of color?
No, but it's an idea whose time has come. I don't think that we had the numbers in the past, but now I would say there are probably as many as 16 African-American female judges, male and female, and I think 4 Latino judges.
And do you informally get together in any way, shape, or fashion?
Beverly Tatum wrote a book that's called Why Do All the Black Kids Sit Together in the Cafeteria? She's a psychologist. And I guess that's a phenomena that people never really grow out of, even through college or in political or in professional life, because at the annual judges seminar, which is an opportunity, the first opportunity we actually have to get together, there seems to always be that black table. So we take the opportunities that we have.
We know that there is one Supreme Court justice who was a black male.
Yes.
And he'd been preceded by another Supreme Court justice who was a black male.
So
with
wonderful,
truly fine people in life.
distinguished, tall, handsome gentleman who also went to school and hailed from North Carolina.
Yes, he did.
And who was a mentor once I came on the bench. I'm sorry that I forgot him earlier, but I was assigned to Waterbury, and that is also his hometown.
Right.
And he was always on the phone calling me to ask me, how you doing? Very approachable, intelligent, distinguished man.
Yeah. And a great loss.
Yes.
Do you remember the political confirmation hearing when you became a judge? What was that like?
It wasn't traumatic. I think the hard work was done at that point. I had lots of community people who actually came to support me, to speak in my behalf. My family was there. I remember that there was one woman who'd come from downstate to argue against the confirmation of another judge, and she stood up and said, on the theory that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, I know Reverend Cofield, her father, so I just want to be on the record to support her. So I guess the gods were with me that day. It felt like a religious experience. And I would say that the day I was actually appointed was just a wonderful, wonderful, exciting day, especially because I was being appointed as the first. And at that time, my parents filled busloads of their congregation in New Haven and drove them up to the Capitol. And they were outside with signs saying, we love Curtissa, we love Governor Weicker. And there was a police officer whom I'd worked with in Hartford who was also working in the prosecutor's office at that point, who played the pipes, and he donned his little skirt, his whole, uniform, and he came in playing, I think it was Amazing Grace on the pipes. It was just, it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. I had family up from North Carolina, and it was probably one of the happiest days of my life.
I can't imagine that it would not have been. Have you been on the bench long enough to have been subjected to reappointment?
Yes.
And so you had to go back in front of the Judicial Selection Commission again.
Yes. It doesn't get less intimidating.
Oh,
It's still an intimidating experience, especially after you've been on the bench, because you've had an opportunity to make some mistakes. And being a judge means that that somebody's going to leave that courtroom unhappy. And the chances are you're going to see them again. So you just hope that people will take from the courtroom that even though I didn't like her decision, she was fair. And then there are no sour grapes. But when it's time for reappointment, you look for people to come out of the woodwork whom you've made unhappy.
Just as a point of clarification about some things we've talked about already, Judge Glass, Bob Glass, was the gentleman who was the first black Supreme Court justice, who was your mentor and good friend and mine from the Waterbury area. And what happens in judicial circles is you serve for 8 years after the initial appointment, and then you are reappointed, and you have to go back through judicial selection and then back to the legislature.
That's correct.
So you've been through that issue already.
Yes.
Now, has your husband been on the bench long enough to have survived and gone back to reappointment?
No, he's going through the process now.
Oh,
he's
good.
just gone through judicial selection,
Okay.
and his confirmation, I believe, is coming up again in this fall, sometime in the fall.
What area does he sit in as opposed to criminal? What area does he serve in the judicial system?
He also does criminal law, but he's also done civil. Right now he's doing civil in that he's doing habeas petitions, strictly habeas petitions, but they are civil matters.
Does that mean he's typically assigned to the court in the Tolland-Rockville area? Because that's where most of them are heard.
Yes.
Okay. Where have you been assigned since you've been on the bench? What counties, God forbid we should have counties, what areas of the state have you served?
Initially when you're appointed and you're used to having a home territory, you don't particularly look forward to the idea of not being in the same office every day and understanding that from year to year, from September to September, you're assigned to one particular location, but when September rolls around again, you may go to an entirely different location at a different end of the state, and we never know where we're going until we get the notice in the mail. My first assignment was in Waterbury for 3 years, and I did a combination of criminal and civil there. I enjoyed that experience immensely. There was a lot of collegiality among the judges. We made it a point to go to the Waterbury Country Club every Friday and have lunch and dinner and talk. And I felt that I was certainly put to the test as the first African-American female judge, and I remember working very late, and that drive is not pleasant. And hopefully, sometimes during the course of history, they'll fix the roads between Waterbury and Hartford.
That would be something.
Yes, but it's a stressful drive in the morning, and there's always traffic in the afternoon, and as a single parent at that time, I can remember how stressful it would be leaving the office at 6, sometimes 7, and trying to get home to the children who were then in, I think, kindergarten. But it was a wonderful experience, and I got to see an area of the state that I didn't know a whole lot about. And I left Waterbury and went on to Middletown, and again, another learning experience. It's strange, but judges tend to get comfortable in the particular part of the state that they're assigned to, and especially when you're first appointed. So if you're in Waterbury for 3 years, you just want to stay there. You feel like your success is limited to Waterbury. Then I went to Middletown, and again, the staff was just so wonderful, so kind and accommodating. I've made so many friends along the way. It's just been such a great experience to know people all over the state. It's a small state. You can travel a state in a day, and you'll have friends everywhere. No matter where you are, you're never lost. So Middletown was approximately 3 years, and then I think I went from Middletown to Manchester, which was my home territory. And I sat there for 3 years, and I was the presiding judge in Manchester. Then I went to Enfield for a year and left Enfield, and now I'm in totally different end of the state, New London, the shore area. And again, it's a wonderful experience.
So you have not sat in New Haven, is that true?
I've not been in New Haven. I sat in Hartford for 1 year. I did neglect to say Hartford.
All right. And, well, I guess New Haven is kind of a jaunt for you, probably comparable.
New Haven
almost
would
to
be
New
about
London.
an hour. And I know when my husband was first appointed, he traveled an hour and a half. He went from our home in Glastonbury to Danbury every day.
God forbid.
So he spent approximately 3 hours
On the road.
a day on the road.
Have you had juvenile court assignments? Just straight juvenile court?
I've not had a juvenile court assignment. I'm not sure that that would be a good assignment for me. I think that I'm somewhat of a social engineer, and I do like to help people change their lives, but juvenile might be a little bit too close for home for me as an adoptive parent through the DCF system.
How about the nature of the work? Do you do a lot of writing in the course of the time that you work as a judge?
It depends on the assignment. When I was in civil court in Waterbury, I can remember bringing home cardboard boxes of work every weekend, and the writing was extensive. When I'm on trial, there are always motions. As a trial judge, I do quite a bit of writing. Not as much as I did on civil.
And my experience as a trial lawyer generally is that if you're in a jury trial, you frequently, as the judge, have to sit with the lawyers and work out the charge to the jury and
Correct.
all of that very interesting mess that is the finalizing of a jury trial. Must be a fascinating thing to come at it from a judge's perspective.
Yes, it is. I'm proud of my record also, my record on appeal. I think you're almost guaranteed to get an appeal on any case in which there's a guilty verdict in this day and time. But my record on appeal so far has been one of perfection. I've not been overturned.
Congratulations. Do you have any aspirations to the appellate branch of the judgeships?
I didn't at first because I like the day-to-day interaction with people. I feel that I have a strength in working with people and encouraging people to take charge of their lives and to try to change things that need to be changed. But at this point in my career, I've been on the bench now probably 12 years. That now becomes appealing to me. I think it would be interesting to, having had the experience I had in the trial court, to now sit in the appellate court and do some writing and think about the more academic side of it.
As you know, Judge Antoinette DuPont, I believe she was the first woman to be the head judge, as it were, on an appellate side at the appeals level as opposed to the Supreme Court level of the Connecticut judiciary. And Eugene Spear, who has recently passed away, was, I believe, the first black judge
On the appellate court?
on the appellate court.
Yes.
I'm not aware, and I may just be unaware because I haven't actively practiced in front of the appellate court for a while, that there is a black judge who sits on the appellate court at this
There
point.
is no black judge on the appellate court right now, and has not been since Judge Spear passed.
And do you have any idea if, in fact, you were particularly interested in getting that kind of an appointment, whether you'd have to go back through the system, that is to say, apply to the Judicial Selection Commission, go
Yes.
through that, and then be appointed?
Yes, that's the process. You
I
go
see.
back through judicial selection and you're qualified by them for the appellate court. In fact, Justice Glass, before he passed, would call me on an annual basis and say, is this the year you're going to go back and get your papers in for the appellate court? Yeah, and that would be the process. You'd go through that and then be reconfirmed.
Okay. Now, do you have an ambition to serve as a judge for a certain limited number of years, upon which you will go out and write the great American novel about being a black woman in the judiciary?
The interesting thing about being a judge is that you can be a judge, I suppose, until the day you're actually buried, because I think at 70, we have to take senior status. And that just means that we can work when we want to. I know many judges go to Florida for 6 or 7 months of the year and then come back for 3 months and just try to keep involved in the law. It gives them an opportunity to get back on the bench for a short period of time. So I don't know if I would ever totally give up working as a judge, but I have a calling to do something that involves children. And I know my husband's hoping that it's not going to be, open my house up as an adoption agency, because it seems to be, our house is never empty. I have many children.
Gender, just generally, in your experience in the lawyer world, in the prosecutor world, in the judicial world, does gender play a role in judicial decision-making?
I would think that it does. I mean, even in our most recent judges seminar, we were told that we need to honestly look at how we write our opinions, and that our opinions are a product of our life experiences. And we are to understand that and then go from there and try to be as fair as possible and not let our opinions be written strictly from any particular bias. But gender does play a very important role in how I see a case. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing.
Do you have occasion where you're actively involved in getting ready to write a significant opinion to approach what would be, if it were your husband, for instance, a male judge, and get another perspective on a decision that you'd be rendering?
Well, I have the good fortune to have that right in my own home. So I do frequently call my husband and other male judges, but more frequently my husband, because it's just convenient, and say, let me run this by you, or let me bounce this idea off you. And he does the same thing with me. I would say that sometimes, you asked me earlier about the advantages or disadvantages. Sometimes there's an advantage in being a female judge, because I don't get into a testosterone war with a lawyer, as may be described to me by male judges at times. But the disadvantages might be, I've noticed that many times I'll say overruled, and the argument continues as if I never said overruled. And I find through talking to male judges that that's a unique experience to female judges. I think male judges are looked at as being more authoritative, and once they rule, that's it. But I think the lawyers tend to think that they're whining to mommy a little bit when it comes to a female judge.
In the course of the assignments you've had in the several cities that we've talked about where you've served as a judge, has there been an assignment that was more challenging than any of the others to you?
Well, I only had to do it for 3 months, but if I were going to give a Purple Heart of the judiciary to any judge, it would be to the judges who sit in family and divorce court. That is a stressful job. You're dealing with people, the breakup of families, and no one is happy. No one gets the whole piece of the pie. And you're talking about children's lives and placing children, and whether a family goes from, how do you divide their assets so that everyone can still survive? And it's a never-ending story. It's a case that you're going to live with for the rest of those people's lives, or until the children are out of the home.
What qualities to you make a good judge?
I think that a judge has to have the desire, and this could just be my particular background, but I think that a good judge really wants to be a good public servant, that he or she wants to provide a service to the community. That they realize that this is not, a pleasant job, but they want to do justice, the desire to see that justice is done. And then you need a good intellectual ability. You need the ability to do legal research, writing ability. You have to have good people skills. There are a lot of pro se defendants in both civil cases and criminal cases. You have to have patience with people. You have to let them actually have their day in court to leave there feeling that they've been heard. That takes patience, and it takes a good temperament.
In the federal system, where we have judges and U.S. magistrate judges, typically the U.S. District Court judges who are appointed for life have at least 2 clerks who do their bidding. I mean, all of their research, all of their assistance with respect to writing, helping them in the courtroom. What's the arrangement like for a Connecticut Superior Court judge?
It depends on what our budget is like at any given time, because there are always cuts. But we have limited access to law clerks, and we have to share them quite frequently. So we don't have any one clerk who's assigned to us at any given time. But if we get into a case, especially a case of first impression, where there are new legal issues, we can get a clerk assigned to us, but just on a limited basis.
Okay, so that there's a body of clerks who are available to the judges as a whole.
Yes.
Is that per judicial district, or is that just across the state?
It's per judicial district, and it's usually approximately 2 clerks per judicial district. That's what it is for me right now.
Okay, and in the judicial district in New London, how many judges sit?
I would say about 10.
All right, so it's 2 clerks for 10 judges. Sounds like my office.
Yeah.
Working for the city is an interesting experience with respect to assignment of bodies as opposed to coming out of private practice, where I was liberally languished with associates and staff. It's a very different experience.
No, it's not. It's not a 9-to-5 job,
Okay.
and it's not, because there's homework.
And as you did work as a prosecutor and had that workload, and you've done all of this work now as a judge for a goodly number of years. How do you compare the workloads, would you say?
Being a prosecutor it's a difficult job, and you work every minute of the day that you're there. But usually you can leave the work at the office. Your free time is your free time. Unless you're on trial, and let's face it, we don't try that many cases anymore. But being a judge is entirely different, because normally there's something to do when you get home.
And you have children to care for, a husband to listen to and feed, and children to feed. So when do you go to bed?
Well, I suppose it depends on the particular person. I'm a night person, so I would tend to work late. And my husband's a morning person, so he's up at 5 o'clock every morning, and it's at his desk.
And at this point, everything's computerized.
Yes, the judicial department has recognized that we need computers in our work, and so they've provided every judge with a laptop computer, which really gives us no excuse for not doing our homework.
Did they provide training as well, speaking as a dinosaur in the area of computers?
It's available, yes.
Okay.
We have our technology department and seminars from time to time.
And have there been, in the course of the time that you've been a judge, have there been changes in the judicial system which you've seen as either positive or negative?
Not within the system itself. I just think more in society, in terms of the impression that people have of courtrooms. It used to be that when a person was going to make an appearance in court, the person looked upon the courtroom as a place of dignity and respect and dressed accordingly. It's been very difficult to change now to see people coming into the courtroom like it's a day at the beach and somewhat responding to judges in a casual street talk manner. That's very difficult for me.
What, if any, kind of control does a judge have over that kind of a situation?
Depends on how many issues you want to have to deal with at judicial selection. We are told that it's not our courtroom. We know it's not our courtroom, but we also know that we work in the halls of justice and that people have to have respect for law and order and for the system. And so we might put up a sign on our door that would say, especially even as it relates to lawyers, no cell phones. If they ring, they will be confiscated. No shorts. Nothing, looking very seductive, that type of thing. But for the most part, I think that's where lawyers come in. I think it's a lawyer's responsibility to tell that lawyer's client how to address the court and how to dress for court. And I find that lawyers they've just dropped the ball when it comes to those particular issues.
You went on the bench when you did. It's been 10 years?
Just about 12.
12 years at this point. When you went on, you were the first African-American woman, and you had whatever you had of your perception of other judges of you when that happened, as opposed to today. And has there been a significant betterment? Is it the same? How would you describe that reaction of your colleagues to you as a woman judge?
Well, it's just totally changed now. I don't know if it's just part of the aging process or what, but I would say that many of the judges on the bench now are people that I went to law school with. They're my peers. We're on par with each other, and hopefully we all treat each other respectfully. So I don't get the impression so much that I'm being tested or held to a different standard than anyone else. I think that I have the respect of my colleagues, and that's encouraging.
You remember when you, since I sat on judicial selection, do you remember being asked who your favorite Supreme Court justice or judges were?
No.
That wasn't one of the,
No.
we almost always asked that question when I was on. If you had to pick a judge who would be the model, if you like, we'll do a state court judge and a federal judge. The man or woman who was the federal court judge who would be the model for you, who would that be?
Well, it would always be Thurgood Marshall. I know that he came from I'm from an humble background, that he was motivated by justice, I think, and not by his ego, and that he worked hard to reach his goal. And I can relate to him and to, I suppose, his accomplishments.
How about on the state court level? Is there a judge or justice to whom you have hold great respect or have had great respect for?
I have great respect for Judge Fleming Norcott. He's from New Haven, which is where my parents lived. I know that he was very active in the community even before he became a judge with the Center for Advocacy, Research, and Planning. I know that his commitment to the law and the community doesn't end at the end of his workday. He's out in the community. He's educating the community. I also have tremendous respect for Justice Peters. I believe that Justice Peters was the first female Supreme Court justice in the state. And I note that even though she's now a senior judge, that she's out in the community, educating the community. Most recently, I saw her at the Brown versus Education debate.
It was a wonderful debate that was put on at the Harvard Community College downtown in the old G. Fox building with John Britton and Jack Greenfield from who actually argued the case to the Supreme Court in 1954.
It was amazing to see him.
Fabulously interesting program. Yeah, yeah. What qualities make a good lawyer, in your opinion?
I think the best lawyers are the lawyers who are extremely organized.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be organized and prepared. And if you come to court frequently and you're not prepared, or you miss court appearances and you're not organized, you do a disservice to yourself and to your client.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have credibility in the courtroom, not just for the judges, but for your own clients and for the staff.
I was once in the New London court, or it may have been Norwich, and Judge Burdon from New Haven was sitting there, and it was the end of his tenure. He was being transferred to another judicial district. And on the occasion of that last day, the staff of the court building came into the courtroom and applauded. I've never seen that happen to another judge, but I always had a lot of respect for Judge Burdon, who was recently retired from the Connecticut Supreme Court. But he was obviously a man who treated the staff like they were human beings and people who mattered, and to them, he mattered. It was really a wonderful testimonial.
Well, I hope I share that trait with Judge Burdon, because I can tell you that the people who helped me succeed, the foundation of my success, were the clerks in the Morgan Street courthouse, the clerks who were, since I was the only female prosecutor, when things got really rough, I would escape to the all-female clerk's office. And they were like mother hens to me. And the janitors. I think I had the cleanest office in that dirty, filthy building. And it's just part of home training. Treat people the way you want to be treated, regardless of what your job is. And it doesn't cost anything to treat people with respect.
What do you conceive as being your most important contribution as a judge?
Giving other people the confidence to know that a dream can be reached, that a dream can become a reality if you work hard, that a work ethic still makes a big difference. And I think I gave a lot of people hope. A lot of people seem to look at court in a different way when I was appointed, not because of me as a person, but for what I stand for, that the court system belongs to everybody, and that everybody has a chance of having their case heard, and that you'll be listened to.
In connection with the whole notion of making the system seem, for purposes of the public, to be someplace where it ought to show significant respect, do you think the judges should be more visible in the community in an attempt perhaps to raise the level of the perception of the community about judges, the system, etc.?
I certainly would advocate that. I can understand why some judges would be hesitant to do that. And basically, I suppose anything you say can be misinterpreted and can come back to haunt you. And so some people might shy away from that. But it's just so important to have people understand how the system works, how you make your best impression in court, what your rights are, what are the programs that are available to you that will help you keep your record clean. Do you really need a lawyer now? How do I find a lawyer? There's so many questions that can be answered without creating any risk to the judge as an individual. And I just think that that's part of the job.
And would it be fair to say that that's one way that the judges or a judge can contribute to information in the broader community?
Yes.
How about in the legal community, especially as a woman judge? What do you think that a woman judge can contribute to the quote-unquote legal community for purposes of making that a better, maybe more gentle or civil place?
Well, I suppose sometimes we can take the heat for positions that might be unpopular in terms of perceived biases that women lawyers are experiencing. By being an ear in that community, we can go out and hear what the difficulties are for the female judges, and then because our position carries with it some authority and some power, make that known to the chief court administrator. Say that we need to have a survey of bias in the courtrooms. Or I was a part of an organization early on that traveled to many locations throughout the state in public forums to have people actually address the judges about what bias they think they experienced in the courtroom, either as a woman or as an African American or a minority person. And I think we can encourage the direction, we can focus the direction that the judiciary might take in terms of listening to people.
We've talked about the possibility of your considering becoming an appellate judge. Have you had occasion to talk with judges who were on the appellate bench to just get a notion of the difference between the two roles, that is to say, the judge as trial judge versus the judge as appellate judge?
Not in any great depth, but my understanding of that position is that it would be less structured and more flexible. There'd be more days when I didn't have to dress up or come out on the bench and wear a robe. I'd spend more time in chambers, actually with staff and on the computer. There'd be certain days when I'd hear oral argument, but other than that, it would be a lot more flexible, as I said, in terms of my actual court appearance.
Beyond what court TV has taught us about, or the programs that advertise or show trial lawyers doing what they do, obviously some of the most significant things that have happened in this country's history have been decisions by appellate courts as opposed to trial courts. The Supreme Court decision in Brown versus Board of Education is not a case that was tried at the Supreme Court. It was tried in a U.S. District Court somewhere in several places, I suppose, since there were 5 cases that went up. But the impact socially was made because an appellate court spoke. Is that one reason to aspire to becoming an appellate judge? That is to say that you can actually mold social situations and make history?
You put that so eloquently, John. Yes, that would definitely be a reason to aspire to the appellate court.
Okay. I don't know that I have any further wonderful pearls of wisdom to drop on you, but what would you want the public to know about you as a judge and about judging and the legal system in this state that you'd like to leave us with?
I think it's a progressive system. There's room for improvement. There are some positions that haven't yet had a female judge, and I'd like to see a female judge, for example, in the office of the Chief Court Administrator. I think that there's safety in numbers, and I'm glad to see that the numbers have improved. And I'd like to see, I'd certainly like to see the numbers increase, though. I can't say that there should be any particular quota on the number of African American and female judges, but I think that diversity is a great benefit to the state and to the people who have their cases heard.
I've had occasion to sit with one of my favorite judges, someone whose appointment I had a little bit to do with way back when, a man by the name of Luby Harper, who sits, and he's from New Haven, and frequently sits on the criminal bench, and is as fine a human being, I think, as I've ever met, and probably the happiest judge I've ever met doing the work that he does.
And a great entertainer. He performs quite frequently at the judges' seminars. Yes.
A man who came up on the streets of the city of New Haven, can literally sit in the GA courts and remind the young people that I knew your mother and your father. So we're going to talk about this in a way that is the impact on the system that he can bring has I think been spectacularly good, and I'm grateful that the system saw fit to make him a judge. And I'm certainly grateful that it saw fit to make you a judge. And
Thank
it's
you.
nice to have known you this long and not to have learned as much as I've learned about you today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, they have to-